Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our product webinar today. We're going to talk about managing dilemmas in product management. And as you all know, product management is all about problem solving and facing questions and unknowns and trying to solve these dilemmas through choices and risks. And options that you have. And today I'm going to talk about all of this and try to make some sense out of it. Before we begin, I want to just mention a little about who I am. So my name is Alon. I'm a product director at Fiverr. Fiverr is the world's largest marketplace for digital services. I've been at Fiverr for 4.5 years. I come from a design background. I studied computer arts at the School of Visual Arts in New York. And I've been actually doing freelancing works in the last 20 odd years, selling digital services. At some point, I had my own design agency, where I acted as product. And I've had several product roles since then and until I got to Fiverr, and that's here we are today. Excuse me. So I want to start by talking about our product methodology, which we apply in Fiverr, because I believe that structured methodology, which I will explain in a minute, really helps us minimize the unknowns and the questions and the dilemmas we're facing in any product work. A product process, high level, contains 6 steps. Actually, it's 7 steps, but the 7th one is the final call. But the work itself is 6 steps, distinct steps of working on a product. First, you need to start with finding the problem or the need or the opportunity that you have in your product. Just to give an example, you see a drop in the click-through rate from your product page to your payment page. So that would be your problem. Then you need to define what the hypothesis is, because the difference between these two is, while the first one you understand or you find what the problem is, that doesn't mean that you understand or know what causes this problem. And the hypothesis is trying to define what is the cause of an example I mentioned for the drop between your product page and your payment page. You then need to validate it with the data. It's not enough to feel it or think it. You need to actually look at your data and validate the problem hypothesis, and you need to propose a solution hypothesis. Any product problem can have multiple possible solutions, and you need to kind of like look at all of them and weigh in the potential impact of each such solution. You then need to define the primary and secondary KPIs, because you need to be able to measure whether your solution was successful or not. And you need to run an A/B test, because that's the only real way to know whether you were successful or not. And in the end, like I said, the final call is you need to make a call whether you want to stay with a change, with a product, with a feature, or iterate on it or kill it all together. So let's dive into each one of those steps, and I will also give an example of something we did on Fiverr to illustrate what it actually looks like. So finding the problem, you need to really focus on the pain points on your product and funnels and flows. You need to understand what causes friction and frustration on the side of your customers. You need to look at bad practices that you bring forth in your product, things like inconsistent design or copywriting that is not doing the job, or bad product practices or bad technological issues. And you need to look at missing tools and features that actually need or are required by your customers to accomplish what they have come to accomplish on your product. I want to talk about an example on Fiverr, and I will actually talk about a small one because I purposely chose something that is not a big feature, not a new product we are launching, just to show you that these 6 steps or 7 steps process um, helps you regardless of whether you're working on something that is small or big. The results and the process will have to be the same. In our example, like I mentioned, Fiverr is a marketplace for digital services, and buying a service, any service for that matter, it can be, even calling a plumber to your house or a car mechanic. Buying a service starts with defining your need or understanding that you have a need and a need that you cannot answer yourself. So you need to find the right service provider, which isn't always easy, especially if you don't have somebody you've worked with in the past. And you need to understand the operation, how that provider works, and how much it's going to cost you. You need to be able to articulate your need and make sure you have an alignment with that service provider. You need to make sure that they understand what you need and that they can actually deliver it. You need to commit to the process and the payment, and you need to follow up and monitor the process because you have to get that assurances that you've made the right choice. And you need to hope for successful results. And all of that causes a certain level of anxiety. Buying a service when you lack the expertise, you don't know how to do it yourself, you don't know what the process looks like because you don't have the experience or the practice, and you definitely don't know what the results will be like, can cause anxiety. In our example, we're going to focus on the follow-up and monitor process, which is the order itself. It's the interaction between the client and the freelancer once the order has started. In the order on Fiverr, we look at different quality metrics through algorithms, and we actually communicate that to the freelancers as well, because we want them to be able to monitor themselves also and be able to improve themselves. We look at things like order completion rate and quality of service that comes in the form of ratings and reviews. We look at meeting deadlines and so on and so forth. And the need in our case was to continually improve the experience and optimize quality metrics. Like I mentioned, I purposely chose something that is pretty much a daily routine in the product work, optimizing your numbers. Even when your numbers are good, you always want to make them better. In our case, we wanted to look at the few cases where the completion rates or the customer satisfaction were not where we wanted them to be. So this is obviously a wide area, and we need to narrow it down and really understand what is the root cause of the problem or the need. What is it we're trying to accomplish here? Our hypothesis started with theorizing what would look like if you had put that buying a service on a graph, with the y-axis being the anxiety level and the x-axis being time. And like I said, when you decide or you understand that you have a need and you don't have that expertise, you already come with a certain level of anxiety, which grows when you try to find your provider and stays pretty high until you've reached an agreement and alignment with your service provider and there's a contract to start working with. And then it can rapidly go down as work starts and you get some kind of assurances and acknowledgement that you have made the right choice, that you've called the right plumber, or that you've worked with the right designer, or that you took your car to the right mechanic. This position between the contract or the agreement or point of alignment to actually starting getting these assurances that alleviate your anxiety level, that's where the potential we were looking at. And when we hypothesized that when that assurance, that acknowledgement, that point in time that actually alleviates your anxiety levels is not there, this is when your experience is less than optimal. So our hypothesis in the need to optimize those seldom cases of unhappiness, where if the freelancers do not communicate with the customer when the customer is actually expecting it, the level of anxiety and consequently the likelihood of the customer to be dissatisfied remains high. If we go back to the graph, thanks to the vast marketplace of Fiverr in terms of categories and services and service providers, and through the very unique product of Fiverr, which is productizing this first step of reaching an agreement, we can actually minimize the time. So the time you exist in these anxiety levels is even lower. However, in those cases when that professional assurance and that acknowledgement is not there, the anxiety level can stay high and can even grow when you approach the deadline and you have not received what you were looking to receive. And this is the area of potential. This is the potential we're trying to tap into and tackle in this opportunity. Once we have that hypothesized, we need to validate it with data. We need to actually make sure that what we think is a problem is actually a problem, because whether it's intuition or thinking or even experience knowledge is not enough when you look at scale. And we look at multiple sources of data. We look at external and internal sources of data. When we talk about external sources of data, we really try to know our customers. You really need to know your customer by studying their habits and alternatives and really figuring out how they operate off your platform. You need to conduct surveys and interviews and research and educate yourself about theories and what makes, the psychology behind what motivates your customer. And what makes them move in a certain direction. In terms of internal data points, we look at events data, obviously, the KPIs. We look at the voice of customers through customer success managers and customer journey professionals. And we look at customer support trends and reports and tickets. And we're trying to portray a picture of where pains lie. We conduct user testings and we do qualitative research as well. In this case of the opportunity we were trying to optimize, like I said, we were looking at quality metrics. And when we looked at the data, we found something very interesting in the realms of responsiveness. And what we found was that when the customer has to wait over a measurable threshold without getting any response from the freelancer, that customer is likely to be dissatisfied with the process. Even if the delivery is satisfactory or good, something in the process just doesn't feel right, to the point of having over 30% more likely to be dissatisfied in those few cases when the measurable thresholds were not met. Over double the chances of canceling the order and 3.5 times the likelihood for late delivery. So this is what we're trying to tap into. And like I mentioned, we also conduct qualitative research. In this case, we wanted to look at a few cases of getting this signal of suboptimal experience and investigate what happened. I want to show you an example of this specific client who has placed an order and immediately wrote to the freelancer, "Hello, how is it going? Do you have everything you need?" 3 days go by and the customer is not getting any response or acknowledgement from the freelancer, and they write again, "Hello, when do you expect to deliver the first pictures?" 10 more days go by without any response from the freelancer, and the client becomes agitated and anxious, and the tone of voice changes. He writes, "I need an update of this project." And in the end, they threatened, if you don't deliver by this time, I will have to cancel, which is what happened in this case. So looking at data, looking at all these multiple sources of data is essentially trying to build a picture from puzzle pieces. Each one of those data sources is a piece of a puzzle, and you're trying to piece them together to make a clear picture of your product problems, your product opportunities, and solutions. And we have to remember that no matter how much data you collect and you look at and interviews and surveys you conduct, you always have to remember that it tells part of the story and it's not telling the full picture. And we need to fill in the blanks when those blanks exist. And I want to tell you a story that really, I think, describes this nicely. During World War II, the British Royal Air Force were really studying the statistics of their missions and raids over Europe, really to the level of art. They were looking at any and every data KPI they could, trying to, building statistical models and analysis, and really trying to improve the effectiveness of their planes, missions, and raids, and also improve the rates of safe returns of their planes and pilots back to England. And one thing they did was they were looking at the bomber planes that made it back to England, and they were precisely mapping the bullet hits inflicted on these bombers by the German fighter planes. If you will, they built this hit map of those bullet hits, and clearly they saw where the German fighter pilots were aiming when they were confronting the British bomber planes. Evidently from this picture, the wings and the center of the fuselage and the horizontal stabilizer on the back. And their conclusion was, okay, let's enforce these areas. Let's put more protection in these areas, which will increase the safety of our bomber planes, and more planes will make it back home safely. And they did, but the result was that it didn't work. It didn't change the statistics. It didn't change the rates of their bombers' survival rates, and they didn't understand why. At the same time, there was a group of statisticians in New York at Columbia University. This group was formed during World War II. It was called the Statistical Research Group, SRG. And their purpose was to look at statistical models and analysis and problems like this one, trying to help the Allied forces to better their performance and results in the war efforts. And in that group was a young Hungarian mathematician who has fled Nazi Europe to the United States. And he was asked to look at this problem and try to understand why this very precise data map did not work. And he quickly realized what he then termed to be the survival bias. He realized that the British Air Force was looking at the surviving planes, the bomber planes that actually made it back to England. And his conclusion was that you have to look at those planes at the areas that were not hit, concluding that or realizing that those areas that were not hit on the surviving planes were probably hit on the planes that unfortunately did not make it back. And this actually worked. I think this story really exemplifies in a good way what I mean when I talk about us having to fill in the blanks, seeing a picture that is not the full picture, and having the responsibility as product managers to actually try to fill in those blanks. Once we have validated our need hypothesis with data, we need to propose a solution. We need to think about what the change will be that we want to apply to the product that will actually make a change, that will actually make the product work better. What is that value proposition? And any product problem or feature or innovation has, you know, multiple ways to solve it and tackle it, and you need to look at that range of options, and that is poses a dilemma. Which one will work better? We don't know what the results will be, and we try to kind of like weigh in the different factors that help us make a decision. Factors like what is the compromise, and we live in a world of compromises. What is the compromise that is the least, the smallest one? What is the solution that will most likely bring the highest impact on the KPIs we're trying to move, and what is can actually be executed in a given amount of time. Our solution hypothesis in this case was if we educate the freelancers about the importance of responding quickly to the clients when those clients are expecting it, then those freelancers' responsiveness will improve immediately, and over time it will become a second nature, and consequently the customer experience will improve. So the product solution in itself poses additional subsequent dilemmas, because in the execution, again, there are many ways to achieve what you're trying to achieve. In our case, we needed to define the rules and actually build the logic of measuring this responsiveness, which is, we could apply different logics, and some can help our efforts and some can actually hinder the efforts. We need to understand how to measure this responsiveness in a way that our freelancers can understand what they need to improve and what they need to do better. And we need to help them in highlighting these required actions when they are needed, so they can actually improve their actions on the platform. And in our case, the solution was fairly simple. We have this seller dashboard. Those horizontal lines at the top center are what we call order cards. And what we did is adding this notification on the order card, alerting the freelancer that the client is waiting for some kind of an action, for a response. And we also mentioned the amount of time in which they've been waiting. That creates a sense of urgency and also makes the freelancer understand that they need to act quickly. We needed to validate this solution through KPIs, through measurable KPIs, in order to understand and figure out whether we were right about the solution or not. I mentioned earlier the completion rate and satisfaction of our customers, but that in itself is a little bit too far down the funnel. And we wanted something more immediate and direct to the solution we had proposed. And we came up with two KPIs. One is, if we want to actually drive the freelancers to act on these order cards, let's measure the click-through rate in that dashboard through the order cards. Let's see that they actually click on the orders and get to the order page. Secondly, we wanted to measure the consequential action we want them to take. Not only do we want them to go to the order page and see what the client is looking for or asking, but also responding to it and doing it quickly. And we run an A/B test. A few words about A/B testing. In Fiverr, we do everything we do goes through A/B testing. It's really the only way you can measure through data whether you are successful or not. We do A/B tests. Sometimes we do A/B/C tests. I seldom recommend doing more than that. And in the A/B test, we try to minimize the variance. Okay, we don't want to combine few solutions into one treatment of an A/B test, because then if something goes wrong, or even if it wins, we don't know what actually moved the needle. In our example, we did run an A/B test, obviously, and we wanted to see whether we we were able to make significant impact. And what we've noticed is that through driving our freelancers through that education, we drove them to act quickly. We have minimized the threshold, that measurable threshold, by 25% less orders that have reached that unresponsive threshold, 30% less reports about sellers being unresponsive, and 15% less cancellations due to this unresponsiveness. The last step is we need to make a call. If it's a win, like I said, it's an easy choice. You deploy it and you make that your new baseline. However, when things are not that clear or when you failed, you need to actually make a decision whether you are iterating, you are testing additional hypotheses, or you kill the feature altogether and you move on to the next thing. And that's not always an easy decision to make. We have a tendency as product managers to love our solutions and love the things that we do, and we have to be wary about that. Mark Twain once said, "Good decisions come from experience. Experience comes from making bad decisions." And the point here is that when you run A/B tests and they fail, it's not a bad thing, because if you follow that structured methodology, then you can always go back and understand what went wrong and iterate on it and move at high cadence, making your product better and better as you go. So product management is managing dilemmas. It's a continuous series of problems, questions, unknowns that you face. And like I said, through that structured methodology, we try to narrow down and really bring down those numbers of unknowns. We know that dilemmas can create breaks. And the more unknowns we have, the slower we move. So when we run through that structure, when we look at data, when we conduct our researches, when we acquire the knowledge that we need to understand our customers and our products, we have a better chance or higher capabilities of clearing the fog and really focusing on dilemmas that are inevitable, unknowns that we need to make choices on. And when we have those unknowns, we try not to fret on them. We have to reach a decision and move on. Sometimes it's a good decision, sometimes it's a bad one, but we learn in the process. We really encourage engaging in wide discussion throughout the process, from defining a problem or an opportunity, through realizing what the hypothesis is, looking at the data, solution, and so on and so forth, because that widens our perspective in looking at the product. But in the end, as a product managers, you need to kind of like narrow down that space. You need to look only at the relevant feedback and data in order to be able to make a decision. I mentioned intuition, and intuition is great. Nobody can really shut down their intuition and their gut feeling, but it's not enough. You have to really look at the data in the end. And intuition is nothing but opinion. Data is what we need to actually look at to base our cases. We need to be fearless because we don't want to get stuck. We want to make decisions. We want to move fast. And making choices and making decisions at high cadence has an element of courage to it. So we do need to be fearless in that way, but that doesn't mean that we have to be careless, because being careless not only puts our product KPIs, business KPIs at risk, not only does it increase our chances of failing, but it also means that, being careless means that you're not following the structured methodology. And not following that means that in the likely event of failure, you will not learn anything. You won't have that tools and the toolbox to actually learn what happened and improve. Dilemmas tend to paralyze. I mentioned the analysis paralysis that we can get into and overthink and we need to really manage them and narrow them down. Former President Obama was once asked about why he has only two shades of suits, blue and gray. And he answered, I try to pare down my decisions. I don't want to make decisions about what I eat or what I wear because I have too many other bigger decisions to make. And this is what our structured methodology is helping us achieve. I will end with the words of Theodore Roosevelt, who said, in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right decision. The worst thing you can do is nothing. I thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, and good luck.